Welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to make their way into the creative industries. I'm Amelia Ciandra, and I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel Allen.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Hi. Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good. Enjoying the snowy weather at time of recording. It is a white Christmas so far, so that's always nice.
Yeah, I was just saying to someone, I love the snow the day that it falls, and then I want it to be gone.
Yeah, the moment it turns to ice, it's no longer fun.
Yeah, and then it turns to that brown slush, and it's just like, it's everywhere and it's gross. Yeah, so I wish the snow could fall and be really beautiful, and then the next day melt and go away.
I've got a fun fact for you about snow. For anyone that's like been out in the snow when it's snowing and stuff, and it's actually landing, so it's actually like forming snow on the ground. If you've ever thought that the world seems like a calmer, quieter place when it's snowing, that's because technically it is, because sound is deadened by the snow, so it doesn't reverb off of snow. So the world is genuinely quieter when it's snowing. It's not just because suddenly there's less cars on the road, although there is also less cars on the road, but all of those things put together, sound doesn't travel as far, so the world seems quiet and peaceful.
So amazing. I used to live in New York City, and when it would snow, it was my favorite because New York City is, the city that never sleeps. And that is really true. And it's very loud. And when it would snow, it felt so magical, the quiet and the silence in a place that is just never quiet. It's such a magic thing. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing, Dan.
No worries at all. I'm very excited about today's guest, though.
Yes, I'm super excited about today's guest. He is a friend of mine. So I'm just name dropping here all over the map already. We are going to be joined by Nikhil Parmar. He is an actor and a writer. And he truly is both of those things, which is going to be, I think, really exciting to talk to him about those kind of different strands that he's on.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think hearing about multidisciplines and understanding that you can pursue different things that interest you and be successful on multiple fronts is, I think, really, really interesting. And I'm really excited to peel back the curtain on that. And I mean, he's been in some amazing stuff. He's been on the Apple TV show Foundation, one of your favorite shows as well, I believe, Amelia.
Yes, he's on This Way Up, which is Aisling B's television show, which if you haven't watched, check out. It is just beautiful comedic drama. I really love it, and he's great on it as well.
Superb.
So welcome to the podcast, Nikhil. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Very exciting.
We are really looking forward to talking to you. One of the things that I was excited to talk to you about is that I feel you are a true slashy. You're really, truly an actor/writer.
Nice, I like that term.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think I've not heard that term before. I like it. I think, I think it's sort of.
I was like, "What's a slashy?"
Slashy came from honestly, it's from Zoolander. Do you remember Zoolander, the movie?
Yes,
there's this hilarious part where they give out a slashy award, and it's for actor/model. So that's a different thing. You're not an actor/model, although you have been a model too, haven't you? So maybe you are a three-way slashy.
No modelling for me. Just a two-way slashy, acting and writing. I would agree with that. I think for a while it was I probably considered myself an actor first and foremost and only, and writing was something that I was doing on the side, and it was something that I loved doing, but I hadn't really had any intimation as to whether this was going to be something that I could pursue properly in a professional capacity. And then I guess in the last 3 or 4 years, it's become something that I do for work as well. And now I kind of do both and see them both as separate endeavours as well as being occasionally connected when I write for things that I act in.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about that? You have done some writing for yourself. Will you tell us a bit about that and what that was like?
Yeah, sure. So I think when I started writing, everything I wrote was stuff that I was wanting to act in. I think it was like that. The plan was, if anything gets made, I can act in it, and it's a way of helping my acting career along. Actually, the first script I ever wrote was a TV pilot called Invisible, and I then a few years later, after I got my writing agent and I started working a bit, developing some original stuff for TV, I converted that pilot into a play, and the play is also called Invisible, and that went on at the Bush Theatre in the summer. And that was my first proper experience. I'd done like a couple of read-throughs of stuff that I'd written that I was acting in, but it was my first proper experience, acting all my own words, and it's a one-person play as well, so it was just me on stage. It's a really fun process. I mean, it's extremely exposing, obviously, because every single review and anything anyone says about it is pretty much exclusively focused on me, which is fun if it's a nice review. It's not very fun if it's not a nice review, which we had a couple of, which is fine. But yeah, it's a interesting process, because you sort of, when I write anyway, I'm sort of saying it in my head. As an actor, I'm thinking that how would this be said? Obviously, if you're then going to read it, if you're then going to act it yourself, you're sort of taking a part of the process of an actor away, which is that I already know how it's going to be said or how it should be said. So I think in rehearsals, what was really fun was working with the director Georgia Green, who's a great director, and finding that process and like finding new ways to say it and not being stuck in the rhythms that I'd conceived when I was writing it, and letting myself be free and find different comedic beats, different dramatic beats in it, so that it didn't become stale, because I wrote the thing 5 years ago, and if I was reading it exactly the same way as I'd written 5 years ago, it would probably feel quite static and lethargic on stage, and I didn't want that.
Yeah, and I remember you and I talked a little bit about when you were rehearsing Invisible and kind of getting ready to put it up, is that I've written a one-person show as well, and it's about me, and I play myself. But this character that you wrote in Invisible, though he might have some similarities to you, is not you. Right.
Yeah, no, he's not. I think that was also key, because he... in Invisible, the things that the character ends up doing are, not. I try not to make judgments on it, but they're not necessarily what you would call like good things. That he commits. He does some bad things that that are sort of logical within the world of the play, but they're morally questionable acts. And so I was kind of quite keen on finding where we're different, so that I didn't. So there was a healthy amount of separation between the two of us. The way I sort of see writing for yourself as an actor is, particularly with comedy, I've acted in a lot of comedy. That's most of the things I've done have been comedic as an actor. And I think I find it quite fun and fruitful to think of the characters that I write for myself as being me, but with a key part of me removed. So I would say that the character in Invisible, Zion, is me, but he's a little bit he's a bit thick, like he's a bit slow on the uptake. He's not quite, he doesn't really think before he speaks. I think I try to be a bit more considered with what I say, and I try and Zion's incredibly impulsive, and he just goes with the first thought in his head, doesn't matter what the consequences are. And that's a really fun thing in my brain to remove, because it just frees me up and says like, okay, what would I do in this situation if I didn't have any self-restraint or any of the impulse control that I've built up as an adult. And so that was a key difference, and I think we always went back to that as like, okay, but Zion's not me, so if I was me but removed impulse control, where would he go? And that's quite a fun place to work from.
Is there a big sort of difference from like finding the character as a writer and then finding them as an actor? Like, do you look at that as two separate processes? And is there like a clear divide, or is it all one thing from your experience with the play?
I would probably say the latter. I would say it was probably all one thing. I think it was so in my bones by the time we started rehearsal. I knew that character so well that he was already 60-70% formed as a character by the time we got to rehearsal. I think the thing that I underestimated would be such a challenge when putting it on as a play was stagecraft, like how to use the space and like take it from being, because it's supposed to be a funny play, and I knew I had some awareness of the fact that some of the dialogue, made me laugh and it made my director laugh, and I was like, okay, I think this dialogue works as a funny scene, but you can't just say things. Obviously, the audience has got to see some demonstration of this scene in your body, and it's the stage you've got to feel alive in it. And I think finding that physicality was, I didn't have that at all before rehearsals. Actually, we had a movement director that came in, and I've only acted it before this play. I'd only acted on TV and film, so I'd never done a play, and I understand that movement directors are very common in theatre, but I never had an experience with one. And she sort of, she was called Diane, and she was incredible. Diane Alison Mitchell. She came in. So the character in the play, I do a lot of scenes where I'm voicing both characters in the scene. So I'm Zion, but also Zion's ex-girlfriend, and the dialogue is very quick, and it's quite difficult to know who's speaking when you do it very quickly. And so I would turn my head if it was Zion. Zion would speak to the right, then Ella would speak to the left. But that's not, when it's going really fast, it's not enough necessarily for the audience to understand who's speaking. So she came up with this idea, which was basically giving each of the two characters in the scene a very distinct but very small physical action that would immediately tell the audience who was speaking. And so for Zion, he was very... so Ella, the ex-girlfriend, because she's very frustrated, she was very uptight, so her fists would be up by her chest, and she would be like tense in her body, because Zion was annoying her, whereas Zion is very loose and irritating, and kind of like his energy is very listless, so he was sort of down, his shoulders were hunched. And just by doing that one physical action for each, immediately the audience could tell who's speaking, and also it worked with the comedic beats of the scene, because you didn't need to keep up. You could allow the rhythm of the dialogue to sort of work, because you weren't trying to figure out who's speaking. And that was all found in rehearsal through Diane's work and through Georgia, the director's work as well. So yeah, there was a separate element to it, but I would say that was probably more in the physical zone.
So I didn't realize that you had originally written it as a television pilot. Can you talk a little bit about what's that kind of adaptation process like, where you said, okay, I was writing this for the screen, and now I want to adapt it into something for the stage. And also, I presume when you wrote it for the screen, it wasn't a one-person endeavor.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it had all the different characters. And I think when I wrote it for the screen as well, it was the first thing I'd ever written. And I think I was incredibly anxious and keen to get to page 30 or page 35. It was a half-hour script, and so there were scenes in there that were sort of, it was the first thing I wrote, so there were scenes in there that were complete filler. They weren't, necessarily good scenes or dramatically necessary or relevant. So I think it was basically about taking out from that script what it was that I loved about it, which was the premise. Which, shall I explain what the premise is? Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So the premise is basically, it's set in a world in which Islamic fundamentalism no longer exists. So 7 years before we start the play, Islamic fundamentalism was, we don't give any reasons for this, it was just completely wiped off the face of the earth. And we meet this guy Zion, who's a British Indian actor in his mid-20s, just like me, and he is in an identity crisis. And he starts to get it into his head that since brown people stopped being seen as the threat by white people, they started to become invisible, and white people stopped seeing them at all. And he starts getting this crazy idea that the only way brown people can be seen is if they are the threat. So he comes up with this solution, which is to fake the return of radical Islam so that he can become the threat again. And the play is basically, that was the thing that I always... Whenever I told it, just like you guys did then, whenever I told that idea to anyone, they always laughed at that little bit at the end, and I realised that was the bit that I loved about it. The idea that you could think the only solution to your problem is to fake the return of terrorism and so I thought, how do we get the audience? So the key really with the one-person play was, how do I get the audience to, I think it's around 2/3 of the way through the play, where Zion says, we should blow something up. How do I get the audience to be almost with him at that point, and to be like, oh my God, he's going to say we should blow something up. Oh my God, he's going to say it. And then you say it and they go, oh my God, what an idiot. And so the play was basically about constructing a world and a character and a crisis for him that was so bad and so irreparable that was genuinely the best logical solution that an idiot would find, and then for them to enjoy the sort of ramifications of that terrible solution. And so that was kind of the adaptation process, was like finding Zion's crisis that would lead to that moment making sense halfway through the play. And then, I'd done a lot of work with the peripheral characters in the pilot as well, which was really useful. I could sort of like bring them into the play as and when. But it took a long time. It wasn't like a quick process, but that's kind of the way it goes, I think.
Did any of the dialogue survive exactly how it was? So, and when I say dialogue, I don't just mean obviously the dialogue that your character's saying, but the interplay with the other characters. Did any of it survive just using the back and forth and you being able to perform that in the way that was staged, as you mentioned? Or did everything really need that sort of comb over to work in a way that could be delivered by one person?
You know what? I actually, weirdly, I looked at the old pilot, not too long ago, and staggeringly, some of it actually did survive. I think the thing that I love writing more than anything is dialogue. And I get very wedded to a good joke. If I've written a good joke in a scene, it's like torture to take it out. So there are lines of dialogue that I wrote when I was, however old, 22 when I wrote that pilot, and I did the play when I was 27. There are lines of dialogue that could survive the whole way. I think one of the reasons why I thought it'd be such a difficult play to actually put on, because obviously when you write something, you have it's the furthest thing from your brain is the thought of it actually being put on by a theatre. You kind of think it'll be a good sample. No one's going to want to do it because it's rubbish because I wrote it, etc. And then when they wanted to put it on, the first thing I thought is, how am I going to do? Because I write quite quick fire dialogue. It's quite something I really like doing, is like one word, and it's like for 2 pages, 2 people talking at cross purposes. And on TV, very simple to do that. You just cut between the two. The rhythm is through the cut. But I was very worried when we were doing it when we said we were going to do it, the play, how we were going to manage that. But because I was so wedded to the jokes in it, my director said we'll find a way, and then we found the physical element later in rehearsal, and that kind of that allowed us to keep a lot of that dialogue.
Very cool. And I will say, though this is not an ego-stroking exercise by any means, I saw Invisible and I loved it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So,
Thank you.
We had a good conversation afterwards at the bar talking about it. So, really cool stuff. Well, let's just switch gears a little bit and talk. You wrote this pilot. You ended up adapting it for the stage, getting to perform it on stage, which was your first play, as you said. But you have a lot more you dipped your toes a lot more in the world of screen, and I know you're writing a little bit for screen now, and I'm sure you can't give us too many details, but can you tell us a little bit about what you've got in the pipeline in terms of your writing for screen?
Yeah, sure. Since the play, I've been writing quite full on. The play sort of got me quite a few jobs screenwriting. So I've written. So I've now reconverted the play into a television pilot. So we sold the rights to the TV version of the play during its run, and I was commissioned to write the pilot of that. And now that's a second process of adaptation, having originally been a pilot, which didn't quite work for a variety of reasons. Now doing the same process, taking what I loved about the play and the premise and putting it into essentially a 35-page script pitch for what a series could look like. So that's one script that I finished recently. I finished another one today, actually, this morning, that I just handed in, which is I don't know how much I can say, but basically it's a British Indian themed murder mystery, is what I can say, probably. I'll let you know if I can't say that.
And is that a film or is that a TV script?
That's a TV series, yeah. That would be a limited series. And that's a pilot script, so that's an hour long. It's about 60 pages, that script. And that's my first... that's my first sort of commissioned TV hour. And one of the interesting things about that, one of the challenging things about that was that it's we've got about 15 main characters. It's these 2 big families, and then we have 2 police officers who are investigating the crime. So setting up 15 characters in 60 pages, as well as doing all the things you need to do with plot and reveals and keeping it thrilling and keeping it funny, because it's like a darkly comic series, it is really tough. And I think I've been watching a lot of kind of big ensemble cast shows like Succession and The White Lotus, and trying to figure out how do you give everyone their due, because any of these, one of the considerations that you have to make, particularly for a series like this, is because it's such a big budget pitch. You wouldn't be able to do this kind of series for cheap, just because of the nature of it. Is you need to attract high profile cast, and that means these big actors are getting sent scripts all the time. They're not gonna want to do a season of TV for 6 months if their character feels like it's going to be a peripheral thing. So everyone's got to feel like their place is really important in the script. So that's been really fun to sort of develop that and figure out, and also write for specific actors, which is what we've been doing for this one, because particularly for my demographic, which is British Indian, there aren't as many, there are several white actors in their 40s and 50s that could headline a TV series and get it made. There are fewer British Indians. So I think making sure that we've got, a place for this actor and this actor and this actor is quite important. And
are you writing those characters knowing those people are already interested, or hoping that when they read it they'll see themselves and say, oh, I want to do this?
The latter. We've not gone to any. I mean, I've got 2 friends, my girlfriend and also a very close friend who I've written parts for, because they're both actors, and they've told me unofficially that they want to be in it, but they haven't read anything yet, so they may change their mind.
Was that an asking nicely, or was that a demand?
I was like,
we better be in this.
It started as me giving them a favour, saying, "Oh, I'll write you in," and now they're both incredibly busy and successful actors. Now it's me begging, can you still be in this when we make it? It's a variety, but I think for all the main cast, we're going to go to them once we've got a script and we've got we've got a good idea for who we want for those actors. And then I've written 2 films as well in the last few months, which have both been one was an adaptation of a historical book that I found amazingly. I found it while I was in a taxi in Ireland. I was filming something in Limerick in Ireland, and the taxi driver just got into conversation and told me I should read this book and make it into a film, because he knew we were actors, because we were all staying at this hotel. And I, 2 years later, managed to get a producer, and they found a lead actor who wanted to attach, and we got the rights. So I've just handed in a draft of that screenplay, and
wow.
And then I'm doing a rewrite of an American film, which is a different process, because you've got an existing script and you're trying to sort of work to the studio's notes of what they want different in this new draft. And we've also got a lead actor attached to that. So we're working with a lot of different producers on that, which is really fun, because it sort of helps you with the workload, but it's also difficult because you're trying to fit what you're trying to do into other people's
lots of different parameters.
Ideas.
Yeah. And is that a rewrite of an American film because they want to make a British version of it, or because the American film didn't work and now they are trying it again?
So it's I mean, when I say American film, I mean it's being made by Americans, financed out of America.
Oh.
It's set in Britain.
I see.
Yeah. So the script, basically, they have a screenplay which is an adaptation of. Again, there's a non-fiction book which is about a true story that happened in 2010 or something like that, and they got a writer to write a screenplay, and basically they want to go a slightly different direction to the way that he did a fantastic script, but they want to go a slightly different direction tonally. So they brought me on to basically, I think, to add a sort of more. To give it a different tonal feel in line with what I'm the kind of writing idea, which is more comedic, so that was the sort of remit there. But it's a hard job, because you've got the book that you're adapting, you've got the script that you're changing, and then you've got your own ideas as a writer. So you're sort of trying to meld the 3, and it's quite a complex story. It's a financial thriller, so I had to learn a lot of jargon about finance, which I've forgotten immediately because it's just so uninteresting. But yeah, no, it was fun though. It was a fun process.
Do you go and find that sort of jargon once you've written the scene? You're then like, okay, I need to insert some jargon here, here, and here, or are you allowing that jargon to inform the scene as you write it?
Well, it's a bit of both. It's a really good question. It's I did a degree at LSE, the London School of Economics, and so I've got a lot of friends. I did a history degree, but I've got a lot of friends who work in finance, including 2 of my housemates. And so I went to the house of one of my mates from uni who did a similar job to what the main character in this book did, and I said, here's the situation. Basically, I need him to be in a scenario where he could be humiliated, but then to think of an idea in this scene and everyone sees, oh, this guy's a genius. So that's what I said. I said, I brought him that. I said, what is a scenario where we could get that to happen? And
so he's having to come up with a genius scenario in his own work.
Exactly. Well, he was like, oh, you know what? There was this kid that everyone thought wasn't very good, and then he did this thing, and we were all like, oh my God, he's great, and now he's a great trader. And so I was like, okay, that sounds all right. And so we basically went through what the beats of that thing would be. But it's really difficult because you're writing words that you don't actually, like, you know what they're doing in the scene, but outside of the scene, if you took that line out, I would no longer know what it meant. So you're kind of, those meetings after it, when you've handed it in and the producers are like, okay, so this line here, what's that all about? And I'm like, I don't know what that line means, actually. I was like,
but it's
I know
factual.
What it means in this context. Yeah, it's definitely true.
What did the kid do? Do you remember? I'm really intrigued.
That he said it was basically, there was a trade. So it was during this thing, every other Friday, there's this thing called the details are boring, but basically there's this thing called non-farm payroll, which is a set of numbers that comes out of America, and all the markets go a bit crazy during this period, and there are loads of trades that are done. And this kid was filling in for the guy that books the trades, that sits there and makes sure all the trades that the traders are executing are being logged. I think this is probably pre the current, like, is everything's digital now, but I think this was pre that era. And he was sat there and he basically heard all of these trades going on and got every single one noted down in perfect order, because he was incredibly good at just ingesting masses of information, processing it, and putting it into a discernible format. And he did it in a way that no one thought he was capable of, because he never really spoke. And they realized he's basically just one of those people who can just see a sea of information and pick out what is useful and put it in. But he did it in a very dramatic time of the day, which is when this non-farm payroll came out.
Rain Man.
And so we sort of took exactly, it was quite Rain Man like. It was exactly. And so we took the core of that and put it into a scenario that worked for our film. But yeah,
is that something that you really enjoy about writing, or you find challenging, or something else where you're kind of all of the research sort of elements of it, where as opposed to perhaps Invisible, where you might be pulling from your own story when you have to do these kind of commissioned bits of writing? How do you feel about the kind of research elements?
I don't love it, to be honest. I think like, if it was research into something that I found naturally interesting, like if I was writing about, when so the film that I found out, the book from the guy in the taxi that I told you about, that is a colonial set thriller, and so I had to do a lot of research into like colonial times, and I loved that because that's super interesting to me, and I did a history degree, and I enjoy generally finding out about that period of time. The financial stuff I don't naturally find that interesting, so that is a bit of a chore, and it's also it's difficult to know what you need to tell the story. So you don't know if reading this massive book is going to help you in any way figure out this scene, but you sort of have to read it just in case. And the most frustrating thing ever is when you read one of these 40-page articles, which are just so dense with information, and you get to the end of it, and not only did you not understand any of it, but you realize it's not even about the thing that you wanted it to be about. It's not, and so it's a long process. And I think it's probably something I'll get better at. Like, I'll figure out, okay, actually, for this scene, I only need to know this very specific thing. And I think screenwriters that are constantly churning out scripts probably just have to get really good at that process. And I think it being my first time doing it, I probably wasn't very good at it. But I can imagine if it was a world in which I was interested, it would be really fun.
And do you feel like the research that you do as a writer is any different than the research you do as an actor when you're preparing a role?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think research as an actor is an interesting thing because I don't personally feel like I've worked steadily for 6 years and I've done some really cool parts, but I don't think I've ever done a part that's required extensive research. Like, I work a lot on the script and I'll figure out intention and figure out the comedic beats if it's a comedy or the dramatic beats if it's a drama. But I've not done a job, where I'm playing like a carpenter or like a trader where it would behoove me to go and read a book on carpentry or read a book on trading. I did a series actually that's coming out early next year called The Rig, which is set on an oil rig. And we did have a reading list for that. And I did read a load of books on oil rigs and I watched a load of documentaries. But again, it was interesting to me because I didn't know anything about that world. So I enjoyed reading about it. But I think unless the part is big enough and, jargon filled enough to require it, sometimes that research, I can find it a bit blocking. I don't think it necessarily... I think it can be quite distracting from what the point of my job is, which is to be truthful in that scene. And if that scene is two people talking about, I've scenes with one actor a lot in this show called The Rig, and our scenes are basically about our dynamic and our friendship and our relationship. And doing a load of research on oil rigs is not that relevant to that dynamic. So I think, as a writer, on the other hand, by contrast, everything is research and everything is you need to read everything to figure it out. So because you're creating, whereas acting, I think you're interpreting. So I think oftentimes the work is done for you. The research is done for you as an actor, whereas as a writer, you're doing everything firsthand. It's generative as opposed to interpretive.
Very, very interesting.
Do you resist the urge to go to an oil rig? I imagine that would be one of the less pleasant research.
We were gonna. There was talk of filming on a disused one, but it was. I think it's so expensive to do. So I think they've the VFX they've done for the show to make what we filmed on look and feel like it did feel as much like a rig as I imagine any set could feel. The set was amazing, but I think visiting an oil rig is no joke. I think it's a lot of health and safety hoops you've got to
risk
jump through to do
assessment
that.
for that work trip would be
I don't know if my insurance could hack it.
Great. So I want to ask you a little bit about now, more of the sort of acting that you've done. Dan was asking you before we started recording, you did a few episodes on Foundation, which is a science fiction show. And then I know you were in one of my favorite shows, This Way Up, which is Aisling's B show, which is very uber realistic kind of comedy drama. And so I just wondered, how do you feel about these kind of different genres and how that impacts your experience?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, a show like Foundation is so... It's so clearly... You sort of have to just know the tone of the thing that you're doing. And I think one of the best ways of figuring that out is if you get a job, obviously you don't get the exceeding majority of the jobs that you audition for. If you get the job, it's because what you were doing in the audition was vaguely in line with what they wanted. And I think when I read the blurb for Foundation and got sent the scenes, it was very clearly a very stylized, heightened show. There are naturalistic performances in there, but ultimately you're playing people from different planets who are speaking often in a made-up language. I knew that doing a sort of off-the-cuff quip delivery is probably not going to be what they wanted for that. So you just sort of realise, and I think we all inherently actually know tone. I think we've ingested so much content in our lives. you know what a sci-fi tone is. Obviously, you don't want to lean into it too much because then you're getting into a tropey thing. But you should. I always familiarize myself a little bit with what it is that the person probably wants. In the case of This Way Up, it was so naturalistically written and so it felt so real that I just made the decision in the audition and then when I did the show to do absolutely nothing different to how I usually speak. I do my own voice, I do my own intonation. We do a lot of improv on that show as well, which is so fun. And you know, improv when you're playing something close to yourself is even funner because you can just basically say anything that comes into your head because that's your head and you're playing a version of yourself. So, and whereas on Foundation, the scope for improv is, as you can imagine, not.
Yeah, we're just going to workshop this scene on this
particularly because I was speaking yeah, exactly. Yeah, particularly because I was speaking in a made-up language for a lot of it, which we, you know, obviously my linguistic skills were okay, but not good enough to like ad lib. So yeah, I think just knowing the tone of the thing and being guided by what you did in the audition has always been my sort of
Yeah, I can imagine if you had made up a voice that you're then going to improv in. But, you know, it's different to having a script and giving yourself a chance to prepare how you're going to say each line. But when you're having to come up with new words and sentences off the cuff, that you maybe don't have a clear sense of how that would sound from your character, you'd be shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, no, definitely. It's a whole different ballgame. That.
Now, you recently did an episode of On the Edge, which is kind of is it fair to call it an anthology? And you were in, what was yours called, your episode? Do you recall? Mincemeat, yeah. And that was with
Mincemeat.
Amy Lou Wood, which our listeners might know from...
Yeah.
If you're watching Sex Education, she's in Sex Education. And I know that has begun to kind of get some award attention. And so I don't know if that's the first time that's ever happened, but, you know, how has that been? What's that experience like when, you know, something that you're doing is beginning to get the attention of accolades?
Yeah, it's really gratifying. It is the first time I think. I mean, This Way Up, but got nominated. No, I think Ashlyn won a BAFTA actually for it. But it's the first time it was. You know, Mincemeat was a 25-minute episode for Channel 4, in which I was, you know, sort of the male lead, and it was the first time. It's the first time something that I feel like my part has been quite substantial in has had attention like that. It's really fun. I mean, that job was one of the most fulfilling jobs I've ever done. I think it's a very simple story of a girl and a boy falling in love, but his race, meaning that they can't stay together because of the girl's mother's racist attitudes. And it's really sad, but it's kind of the dramatic payoff is sort of hinged on the audience's whether the audience fall in love with this relationship at the start. So Amy and my job was essentially to make the dynamic between us so lovely and sweet that when it all goes wrong, the audience feels the same pain that my character feels and her character feels, which was really fun. And I love, like, it basically for me it was a rom-com until the end, and I love that space because it's it's all about the dynamic. You don't have to do anything other than just listen to the other person. And Amy's an amazing actress and one of the, you know, best I've ever worked with, and was so, just very emotionally present. And to like work with someone who really listens and responds is so fun, because every take can be different, because if you give it a different way, she's going to respond in a different way, and vice versa. And so, we made it in last summer, and then it got nominated for 3 Welsh BAFTAs a few months ago. And it's really nice. I think if it means that people have seen it, which you can't always tell because, obviously your friends and family see it because you're in it, and everyone who worked on it sees it, but you can't. Often it's hard to tell if people actually watched it But being nominated for BAFTA suggests that at least some people will, and more people will find it as a result, hopefully. It's really nice because it's such a great story and it's beautifully written.
Yeah, definitely with I suppose you can go on Twitter, but then unless people are talking about it live, it's hard to see loads. But I mean, is that always necessarily a healthy thing to do as well, is to go and see sort of what people tweet out about stuff? Because often they're only really putting out either the extremes, right? People aren't putting out sort of middle ground. Although you mentioned reading the reviews of your play, I wonder if that's like a conscious decision to sort of absorb what everyone's saying about stuff that you're involved in, or whether in general you avoid it.
Yeah, I think Invisible, doing the play was the first time that I had been the center of a review, and I knew that was going to happen because that's what happens when you do a play. And I'm never not going to be able to look at them. I don't think. Maybe I'll get into a position in my career in a few years' time where, hopefully being in shows that are being reviewed and being, big parts in those shows, maybe I'll then divest and go, I'm not gonna look. But because it's so new, I'm just too curious. I couldn't not look at them. It is a bit. My acting agent, Lucia, said we got one really bad review for Invisible right out the gates, and generally the rest of them were really nice. But obviously the way it works is you sort of look at the nice ones, and it gives you a little hit for a couple seconds where you're like, oh, this is
sticks with you.
And then the bad ones stay, and you're like, oh my god, that's like, you really look at the words and you internalize them. But Lou said to me, like, look, if you believe the good ones, then you've got to believe the bad ones, and vice versa. If you believe none of them and just go with what you think, then no one else can take that away from you. And like the way it makes you feel when you're doing it and the reasons you did it remain irrespective of what people, the end of the day, these reviews are one person. There's like a few of them, but they're not necessarily the arbiters of all taste. They don't necessarily have the same sense of humor as you. So I sort of went into a period after that, had a little dip after that one bad review, and then I was taken out of the dip by some good reviews, and then I sort of reached a new period of sort of calm where I was like, I'm doing this because it makes me feel good, and also I think it's an important story. And the conversations I'm having with real people afterwards who would come up and say, it moved me, etc., or I felt this, or I've never seen this before, was the reason I was doing it. And I think you've just got to, you've got to be mature about it and not allow these things to sort of. But and to your other point as well, like I've come to it because there's so much TV made. You'll make a TV show. There'll be huge amounts of money poured into this show from all sorts of angles. You've got massive actors in them, and then it'll come out, and people don't seem to see it, or it doesn't get the attention that you thought it would, and it doesn't do for your career what you thought it might would. You thought it might do, and I think enjoying the process of doing the thing and trying to divorce that from how well it does is so important, because I'm going to be in hopefully lots of things over my career, and not everyone is going to see all of them. But if I enjoy doing them, then that's a really such a fun way to make a living. I think you can get very bogged down in like, oh, is it going to get awards? Is it, are people going to watch it? Am I going to get loads of Instagram followers from it? Is it going to lead to the next thing? But if you spend 4, 5, 6 months working on a job and you have an amazing time on that set, and you work with a great director and you grow as an actor through it, I think there's such value in that. And it's easier said than done. I'm not on top of this message myself, but that's the goal anyway.
I think if I can summarize the two things that you've just said, which I think is really helpful for perhaps for our younger listeners, and we do talk a lot about this at our biggest course, our summer camp, is the focus on process versus product. Yes. Yeah. And what we do with our students, the process is really shrunken down and it's super fast. We bring them and we make a film in a week, and we have one day of production, and so it can feel really hard to focus on the process, but we really want to, really what you're saying is focus on the process. Don't worry about the product. And then I think in terms of the product, what I've always thought about reviews, and certainly I'm much more of a theater actor, so there's been lots of reviews in my day, is that opinions are like assholes and everyone has one. So
exactly.
you can take any review with a grain of salt, because like you said, it's one person's perspective. And it isn't about that, ultimately it's about how you felt making it, the message behind it, what you enjoyed. And I think that's great. I hope our listeners, if you hear that, if that's the only thing you glean from this, that's a really important message.
No, I agree. And I think focusing on the product, it's important to note as well that focusing on the product doesn't make the product better. Focusing on the process makes the product better. That's guaranteed. If you really, really care about the process, the product will necessarily be better, because people who work hard and care produce something that's better. But focusing solely on the end product and what it might lead to, it might yield a good product, but it's not going to be, you can't guarantee it in the same way that you can if you focus on the process. So you can't really lose if you focus on the process.
In terms of that advancing, though, obviously, it sounds like, you're so busy writing and also acting. I wondered, certain things I'm sure will have given way to other things that you maybe couldn't have even anticipated. But would you say that your acting opportunities or things that you've acted in have ended up giving you writing opportunities, and have your things that you've written ended up creating opportunities for your acting side as well? I wonder how much they've sort of cross-pollinated and been fruitful.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think most of the, as an actor, most of the work you're getting is through auditions, and that only changes when you're a name and you're getting offered stuff, and that's you can't really plan for that. That happens when it happens, and then that's great. I think I've definitely met. One thing that happens as an actor is I think actors can sometimes be treated as these incredibly talented sort of morons who you don't want to disturb too much. They're very, very talented and they do something very, very well. But if you tell them too much information, they might explode, and they need to be, you give them their cups of tea at the right time and you treat them. And so I think when producers, yes, exactly, when producers and directors know I'm a writer as well, I think sometimes there's an added level of you're on the other side of this as well, so you kind of get how the sausage is made. And so I think they feed into each other, the acting and the writing. I don't know necessarily whether one has gotten me a job as a writer because I'm an actor or vice versa, but being working in both and pushing both aids the other immeasurably, I'd say.
Become a slashy. This is tying into a conversation we have in a lot of our episodes, which is about whether to be a specialist or a generalist, and we had a really interesting conversation about the jack of all trades quote in another conversation we had. So yeah, really, really interesting. This brings us to I think two questions that we always ask our amazing podcast visitors. The first is, what were you doing as a teenager? So if we traveled back in time, what was Nikhil up to when he was 13, 14, 15?
In relation to what I do now, or just generally? Well,
just in general. Maybe not in relation to what you do now. That's the interesting part of the question.
Okay, interesting. I worked very hard at school. I took my studies quite seriously. I think I was always taking the piss at school as well. I was always trying to make people laugh, and I think I probably realised that was, coming from the same need that I have as an actor, which is to be liked and to be to have attention and to have. I think my behaviour in the classroom is not dissimilar to. It's underpinned by the same sort of thing that underpins me wanting to be an actor now. In terms of what I was doing, I watched a huge amount of films. I loved watching films, and I think the two sort of combined at the same age. There was a coincidence of me realising that I loved acting, and me realising that I loved films, and I had my parents. I hijacked my parents' love film membership and would get DVDs, and basically just went through, all of De Niro, all of Pacino, all of Jack Nicholson, all of these guys, like these people from the 70s, 80s that I was obsessed with, and just watched as much as I could. And yeah, I think that like, if there was any doubt in my mind that this is what I wanted to do, I think when I fell in love with those films, I was like, there is no doubt anymore. I need to do something in this realm.
And if you could go back now, if we invented a time machine that allowed you and wouldn't cause a hole in the time-space continuum for you to go back and visit teenage Nikhil and give him some advice, what might you tell him?
Yeah. Very interesting. What might I tell him? Well, I tell him to calm down, first of all, and just like chill out and breathe and stop talking and just listen. I think maybe it's a different time now, and maybe they're all doing this anyway, but I feel like, particularly because I was interested in comedy and I have worked in comedy a bit, but I feel like making stuff that's funny. I think I had loads of ideas of stuff that could be funny that I could have made with friends that we just never really got around to because we kind of thought it was, I don't know if we thought it was uncool or we thought it was trying too hard, or I thought it was maybe unrefined, whereas watching Scorsese I thought was this very sophisticated act that I was doing. But like coming up with funny skits and just doing it, and I didn't have to put it on YouTube or anything, I just mean like doing them and seeing what it takes to make something funny. So many of my friends that who've worked in comedy, were making sketches with their friends from the ages of 13 and just like trying stuff out constantly. And I feel like I would have loved to have done that, but for some reason I never really had the impetus to do it. Maybe it wasn't as easy to make them back then as well, I guess. But yeah, I reckon that would be my advice.
Well,
Go and make
it's
some
definitely
stuff.
easier now, so there's no excuses.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with how good
Yes.
the phone cameras are, and you could literally edit them on the phones as well. So
Yeah,
so
you hear that, young people?
Yeah,
What are you making?
For anyone listening,
And I think it's also important, though, what you said there,
What are you looking
right?
at?
Which is a
Yeah.
good summation of kind of what you've been talking about, which is it isn't about making something in terms of the product. It's about making something to understand the process of making and to
Yes.
experiment with, is what I find funny to other people? That's something I've always asked myself. And whenever
Right.
you're doing writing, I try to write a lot of comedy as well. And I sometimes think my sense of humor is so weird and esoteric, and maybe nobody else is going to laugh at these jokes. And it is about just trying to see sort of how that works. Not feel hemmed in by making something perfect. You're not, the first thing you're going to make is not going to be The Godfather. It's just not possible.
Absolutely. I think that's such a massive reason why people don't do, I was reading my first draft this morning, and it is a first draft, and I was like unhappy with the scenes, and I was like, I've just finished The White Lotus yesterday, season 2, which I just think was masterful and perfect.
so good, wasn't
And
it?
I was reading this pilot, and I was like, this is not that. And then I realised, of course it's not that. That was the end of a however long pre-production process. Like that's the edited version that they put out on HBO. This is the first draft that I wrote my thing, and like realising that that's fine, and not handing in something substandard, but handing in something that like there's room to grow, and that's fine. But I enjoyed writing it, and if I continue to enjoy writing the next draft, eventually, hopefully, you'll have something that's
Yeah, I feel
Okay.
like what you want your first draft to have is potential. That is really the function of a first draft, is for somebody to be able to read it and go, oh, I see something here. It's not here yet, very likely, but there's so
Yeah.
much potential in it, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us. I think this is going to be so interesting for our listeners. And I know we have a lot of, like I said, we talk a lot about doing more than one thing. And I think, you're a great poster child for why you don't need to be one thing, and how each thing that you do helps the other thing that you do, and just makes you better in general.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm glad that was really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a blast.
Thanks,
Thank you so much
Nikhil.
for joining us.
Cool. Cheers, guys.
Superb. I love hearing about people that do multiple different things. But what was so impressive for me was that, you know, he was saying that, you know, he's still having to go to auditions for the acting stuff, and the writing stuff is definitely operating within its own world. So it almost made it even more inspiring, because this is someone that's having success in two different fields simultaneously, which I just found amazing.
It's like he's somehow miraculously managing to swim upstream in two streams. Like, it's as if he's cloned himself and he can be doing both.
You know, because I mean, as you know, it's hard enough. It's hard enough doing one.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
And we always, you know, we've been talking about this so many different times, and I was talking about it with someone recently, actually, just sort of chatting about being multidisciplinary, and you know, I really love being a director. But I very purposefully didn't put all my eggs in the directing basket, because I also really love being an actor, and I'm still pursuing my writing and working with a producer on getting one of my plays put on stage. And I have this one-woman show, and you know, you end up sort of listing all of these things, and it can feel like, holy cow, it's too much. But also, that's what makes it exciting. You know, I think that's what Nikhil was saying, is that he gets to be excited about so many things at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like, I mean, by the sounds of it, I wonder what your experience is. Acting maybe lends itself well to having multiple disciplines, because it's a big world of waiting, right? It's a world of like, I need to quickly do an audition, and now I need to wait in here. And it's then the same thing over again. Okay, round two, I need to quickly do an audition, and now I've got to wait again. So I wondered, would you recommend that actors also find something else that they love? Because I mean, inevitably they're going to have lots of free time unless you're Tom Cruise and you're producing a movie that you're also starring in.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, and then it's funny what you said, even when you get to set, if you're on a film, it's hurry up and wait. You'll do acting on the set for like 15 minutes, and then you'll sit for 2 hours while they move the camera and set up another shot and all of that. So that hurry up and wait kind of thing is the life of an actor. And I completely agree with what you said. I mean, I think it's really worth trying to find something else that you enjoy and that is interesting to you, because until you become a working actor, which takes some time, you know, you will have this space in between. And you can't always be working on your acting, or you might drive yourself a bit mad. And certainly you should be. You should be taking classes and, you know, even just doing tapes for practice. That's all really great and will help you. But I think what Nikhil kind of shows us is that doing something else, even doing some writing that will never see the light of day, even if you just try to write a script for yourself just to see what it would be like, that's all going to be, it's all research. It's all helping you develop your practice.
Yeah, and what was the phrase he used was knowing how the sausages are made.
Yes, knowing how the sausage gets made. Yeah.
Which I think is cool, because that is, as you're saying, it's like, it's only going to make you a better actor. Like, you're understanding where you are, not just technically within the process, but you're understanding from a story perspective where the character is in the vehicle of the scripts, and then the better you sort of understand how that works, the better you're going to be able to actually perform and deliver something that is appropriate for that part of the story and for that character.
100%. And you know, something that is a really great thing that I recommend actors do as a bit of research that is quite fun is to, and you can find lots just on Google, is to find the screenplay of a film that you like and read the screenplay and then watch the film and see that interpretive element that Nikhil was talking about, where what is on the page, how that ends up in the final cut. Because I think understanding that journey is really important for everyone involved, certainly, but especially for actors who are learning the trade.
Yeah. No, 100%, 100%. And there's loads of scripts online. Like, you can Google almost any film, type in the name of the film followed by download script. So many of them are online, and you can just download them, read them on your phone, on your iPad, or however you want to do it. And I think it's amazing just to be able to absorb some of the brilliance. I do recommend that you maybe read some bad scripts as well, so just so you don't start thinking that, oh my God, I'm rubbish, all these people are fantastic, because chances are the fact you've heard of the movie and you can download the script means it's probably going to be very, very good. And those writers did not start out writing scripts like that. They all went through a process. Now in my head, I'm like, well, where can they get bad scripts from? Ask your mates. See if anyone has got a script that they want read or maybe want feedback on, because that's going to be generally operating in a slightly kettle of fish, certainly earlier on in your career. So read your friend's scripts. There might be some writing competitions that you can download examples of, and stuff. And maybe people looking for producers online maybe have uploaded the scripts. So yeah, there's a few ways that you can try and find scripts. And maybe just Google bad movies and then download the scripts for those. Would be another suggestion.
Well, I was going to say, and also if you've seen a movie that you think is a bad movie, it might be really interesting to go and read the script, because you might find that actually it's a bad movie because of how it differentiates from the script. Or you might go, oh, the script is a piece of crap. No wonder the movie is a piece of crap as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. We've got a question. This is from Eloise. Eloise says that she's written a film, a script rather, that she wants to star in. How does she go about getting it made? Which I think is a good question, because especially in film, theatre, you could direct it yourself. Obviously, we do hear that people work with other directors. Some people don't. But with film, you're not going to be able to hold the camera, point it at yourself, and go. What are your thoughts, Amelia?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I would say, like Dan said, you can't play every part, and so I think it's about, if you've written it and you want to act in it, which is terrific, you've got to get a director, you've got to get a DOP or a cinematographer, get some of your friends together and ask them to come in on the project and help you make it, but it is about, I have done this. I have written plays that I then directed. And I think what's the big challenge and what's really key is to know which hat you're wearing at what time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean, Dan?
I do. Yeah.
So like when I directed a play that I wrote, I said to the company, for the first 2 weeks of rehearsal, I am wearing my writer hat, and we are going to work on the play at the table, and we're going to talk about the dialogue, and we're going to talk about the world of the play. And if I want to make any edits, that's when I will do it in the first 2 weeks. And then I said to them, so that they could keep me accountable, I said, after the first 2 weeks, I am taking my writer hat off and I am putting my director hat on. And if you hear me talking about writery things or talking about changing the script, just remind me that's not the hat I'm wearing. And so I think that's a really important thing when you create a team to make something with you. Be really clear with yourself and with them, transparency and accountability, to say, okay, I wrote this, let's talk about the writing, let's kind of workshop it. And then when you move into production, say, okay, now I'm an actor, and I'm moving away from that pressure of myself as the writer as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. The only thing I'd add to that is I think, be prepared to take on some responsibility. And what I mean by that is, if it's, say, a film that you're working on and you're acting, you've written it, and you want to build a team together, you are probably going to be the producer. Don't expect to hand it over to a director and they make everything happen. Think of it as a sales pitch as well. If you want to entice people on, you want to make it as easy as possible for them. If a director can just turn up and direct, they're far more likely to say yes. So if you've already sorted out your locations, you've already maybe picked dates that it's going to be filmed on. If you've already sourced maybe the props together, if it's a small team, then you're going to be in charge of stuff like that as well. Produce the film as well, get everything in place. Maybe if you've got a friend or someone that's interested in producing that can take care of those responsibilities on the actual shoot days, I'd strongly recommend that, so that you can firmly wear the actor hat when you're filming, because you don't want to be like, wait, where's everyone going to be parking? And action, that's not where you want your brain to be. But the more you can do on behalf of your team leading up to the shoot, it's going to be more effort. It's going to be more work. But guess what? Early filmmaking takes a lot of effort and work, because you are always generally a producer if you are trying to make a product happen.
Yeah, don't underestimate the importance of and the necessity of pre-production.
Yeah, also I said product, I meant project. And
Yeah.
I'm not that commercial.
You're not that capitalist.
We're just trying to make some content. No, you're awesome projects. Believe in it and make it happen yourself. And then get the people
and then
on board.
send them to us so we can watch them.
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
Yes, please. Don't forget to send us your questions as well as your films. We would love to see them. Maybe we could even talk about them on air. Ooh, maybe first person to send us their film, as long as it's appropriate, we'll talk about it on air. So do send it to podcast, plural, at Young Film Academy, not plural, singular. I've lost the plot.
Not plural, singular.
I am so hungry. I'm falling apart. Podcast at youngfilmacademy.co.uk. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks, Amelia.
Thanks, Dan. This was great.